In the YouTube video titled Women Have Never Been Oppressed, uploaded by Daria Jane, the argument is just that women have never been oppressed. Jane believes this and chosen not to align herself with the movement because women in the West are not as oppressed as they are in Muslim countries, combined with the fact that oppression is a woman's choice. Given the title of the video, one would assume that Jane would mention women's suffrage or any other major fight for equality that the first three waves of feminism fought. This, however, is not the case. The video should instead be titled Women Are Not Oppressed Anymore because Daria Jane does not speak of the past once throughout the entire video, except to mention that the fight for feminism used to be important. Admitting that the fight used to be important is yet another contradiction because if it was important, then old school feminism must have been fighting real oppression in Jane's eyes. Even with a more accurate title, the arguments made do not hold up for the lack of oppression today. While there are certainly countries in the world that oppress women more than they are in the West, for simplicity's sake America, does not mean that those who do not as blatantly are free of sin. The gender pay gap, the system that pays men more than women for the same work, is still an issue faced by many women in America. Specifically, male registered nurses are paid more than $5,000 a year more than females performing at the same level, according to the University of California, San Francisco-led study. While the pay gap has been seen closing in other fields, the study shows that there have been no improvements for registered nurses in over 30 years. Being paid less than male counterparts is not as obvious an oppression as can be seen in other countries, but it is oppression nonetheless. Muslim countries are also at the center of Jane's video, where she mentions that true oppression is being forced to wear a hijab, as is custom for women who follow the Quran. Despite her point being yet another direct contradiction of the title of her video, as she speaks of what she views as oppression that has happened and is still currently, her point is weak once again. Washington Post article 5 Myths About Hijab by Nadia Ahmad explains how wearing a hijab can be seen as empowering for these women, because in some countries, such as France, having an uncovered head can be required while in government buildings. In these instances, donning the hijab is resisting power and can be used by women to express themselves. Despite there being holes in her point, Jane once again admits to oppression occurring in the world, meaning the true title of her upload should be Women Aren't Oppressed Specifically in the West and Right Now. Jane also discusses the idea of oppression itself. In her words, women have the right to choose not to be oppressed, as she claims she did herself. She then explains how once she transitioned from male to female, men treated her nicer in public, therefore oppression is a state of mind. This point comes across as incredibly ignorant as Jane mistakes compliance with liberation. A woman being paid less than a man cannot simply positive attitude her way to a bigger paycheck. Instead, real change to the establishment must be made. Changing the establishment is fourth wave feminism's goal, and by creating a video with terribly cherry-picked points, Jane has reinforced the importance of that fight. In conclusion, Jane's weak points in combination with constant contradictions made this argument ineffective overall. It is clear that Jane is aware of oppression happening currently and oppression that was fought by the first three waves of feminism. Considering that immediately makes her argument incorrect, she would have needed unarguable points throughout to make up for her contradictions. However, she was unable to do even that. Andrea Sims, with the video Feminists Are Damsels in Distress, explains why she does not view herself as a feminist. Despite most individuals' perception of feminism calling for women to be independent and not allowing themselves to conform to society's standards, Sims argues that feminists need validation from each other. In Sims' eyes, feminists are damsels in distress because they force others to accept them as they are when that is unrealistic, and they push the narrative of a rape culture, which in her opinion is nonsense. One example that Sims uses is feminism being responsible for a 400-pound lady with hairy armpits making it on the cover of a magazine, instead of recognizing the true meaning of why feminism does this. Sims states that it is not reality to force readers to accept that individual as beautiful. She then says that it is fine for anyone to accept the individual for being brave and beautiful, but it is also fine not to. Instead of focusing on the empowering factors and the leaps and strides that representing all bodies has made in recent years, Sim describes it in a way that demonizes feminism and makes it appear as if they are forcing everyone to think as they do. Instead, feminism thrives for body positivity and accepting oneself, the opposite of a damsel in distress. According to the Recovery Village, body positivity is guided by the understanding that feeling positive and accepting of appearance can improve mental health, reduce the risk of eating orders, and allow someone to function at their best. Feminism is not forcing anyone to accept others as Sims claims, but instead fighting for women to accept themselves. Sims also believes that feminism's message is that women are weak, require help, and are not responsible for their actions. Instead, Sims states that if she were to want to empower someone, she would tell them to be confident in themselves. Sims then claims that feminists look for someone to blame for them not being able to look or act a certain way when there is no one telling them that they cannot. Feminism is truly only looking for equality between the sexes. Sims clearly interact with some of the more extreme members of the movement, but they do not represent the movement as a whole. Sims' other talking point is that rape culture is unreal. Instead, that it is a narrative pushed by feminists that have no true understanding of what a rape culture is. Her reasoning for why rape culture is not experienced in the West is the fact that she has never once heard anyone say that rape is okay. The logical fallacy of "I haven't experienced X, therefore you haven't either" does not actually support her point at all. Marshall University's Women and Gender Center describes rape culture as an environment in which rape is prevalent and in which sexual violence against women is normalized and excused in the media. This definition clearly demonstrates that rape culture is far more complex than the straw man that Sims creates. Therefore, she would not be able to debunk all aspects of West rape culture, so she instead simplifies it to any specific individual giving rape their seal of approval. Overall, Sims believes that feminists are damsels in distress, that instead of waiting for Prince Charming, wait for other feminists. She does not see what the movement is fighting for when she looks at feminism. Instead, she sees only the problematic members and those she deems in distress. Throughout her argument, it shifts from feminists needing validation to the lack of a rape culture, neither of which explain well or actually communicate the point of the video, making the argument ineffective.